had probably the best year in terms of the number of baptisms that we've had in about 15 years in our work. When we started into 2016, there was a lot of questions in many of the places where we work, a lot of tension in some of the countries, and we had some problems. We had problems in the Philippines even this fall. Carrying out some of our work, and thought we might even have to be evacuated in an emergency evacuation. There was some tension between the countries, but we made it through it. And the whole year, at different times, there were things like that going on, but it didn't hinder our work at all. We've had a tremendous year, by about 4,000 baptisms. We don't know exactly how many. We know our radio and television programs are getting record numbers of responses as they go out. It's just been a good year in every way. We were able to start another school this year and get it up and running to reach further into China, and that's a major thing. China and parts of northern Burma, the very northern part of Burma, another Bible school, and that was a major accomplishment there. So thank you for helping us and praying for us and supporting us and being a part of what we're doing, and just keep on doing that. We're told to take the gospel to all the world. If we look across the world today and see where people are that have never heard the gospel, and that's where we need to be going, then South Asia is the place. Half the people of the world live there, and they're not people who have been taught. They're Buddhists and Muslims and Hindus and atheists and animists, and very small percentage have ever heard the truth about how to be saved from the Lord's Word. And of course, that's our number one target in our work. All the red pens represent schools and operating bases for our work in that part of the world. You know these first parts, I'm sure, by heart. I go over it every year, but I think it's important that we realize you must integrate methods to be effective in reaching masses of people and maximizing what you're doing. So we use mass evangelism to create the initial contact. Radio, television, broadcast, if you look across the world, we're in a lot of places. 3/4 of the world's population is in the range of a program that we have. We don't know how many people listen, but we have a lot of listeners. We hear from hundreds of thousands a year. And when they respond because they've been told, if you want to study the Bible, then let us know. Respond on that basis. And that's how we start. We use literature to, of course, study by correspondence. Eventually, numbers will begin to ask to be baptized. We've got 30 teams now that work with us. I've been involved in this work 30-something years. And over the years, one by one, I've developed confidence and competence in teams of foreign brethren who can help us. They're out there doing gospel meetings and Bible training seminars, campaigns every week of the year, and this is where baptisms take place. And of course, when we baptize people, that's good, solid growth because they've been well taught. We lose very few. Our retention is about 70 to 75%. We operate a dozen schools. 20% of those who are baptized go into our schools to become leaders in teaching, preachers, Bible class teachers, worship leaders. Our schools emphasize in-depth Bible training, and we go through and make sure that we put people in every new congregation that knows the Word of God. And that's why we have the long-term retention that we do. Some of the countries that we're in, Vietnam, a country with a lot of history with the United States. This project, my youngest son leads the project, but all of us have been there and all of us have helped with it. We have two bases, Hanoi and Saigon, or Ho Chi Minh City. Vietnam is still a very primitive country. It has an agricultural base as far as their living is concerned, lots of poverty, a strong military, a military-type government, and Christianity is absolutely not tolerated by the government. in an unofficial sense. Now, officially, they will tell you that they have freedom of religion there. But if you try to practice Christianity, you'll quickly find out the government will find a way to stop you. So all of our work's underground. And when we went over there about 10 years ago, Jeremy, there on the left, led our first team. We found a few preachers that had been preaching since our troops left there in 1975 when that country fell to the communists. This man in the middle here with his wife spent 25 of the last 40 years in prison because he would preach, get caught, go to jail, get out, preach, get caught, and go to jail. But he managed to keep about 200 members of the church at least worshiping during that 40-year period. And we asked him when we went, do you want us to help you start evangelizing this country? He said, yes, we do. A handful met with us. We started doing some training. Our last training sessions, we've had over 100 each time. Every one of these people could go to jail for the next 7 or 8 years simply for being there with us, with a Bible, studying God's Word. They're dedicated, and we're seeing the kind of growth in Vietnam that we saw in Burma 20 years ago when we started work there in a very similar environment. The Philippines, almost the opposite through the years that we've been there. This country is the only Asian country that calls itself a Christian nation. We have 2 schools now in the Philippines on the islands of Cebu and Samar. About 100 million there, about like Vietnam as far as the number of people. But they're more developed than the rest of Asia as far as their level of competence in preaching, teaching, comprehending the things that they need to know to be effective workers as Christians. And they help us in many of the other countries. We have the second largest number of responses in the Philippines to our preaching as we do in any part of the world. It's a picture from Cebu City. The Philippine Institute is our main school there. We've been going 20 years. We train about 40 a year in the base school, and we have 5 extensions. So altogether in the Philippines, we train over 120, 130 people a year. Good, solid Christians, really competent preachers. That's the director there with an American volunteer that was helping us teach, and that's our last team. Joey led it, and of course I'm with Joey behind there, and that's Joey's son, Robin Dunaway from America, Dave Harris from Cincinnati, and June Arcilio, a Filipino preacher who was helping us on this last 2 programs we had there. They help us in Vietnam. They help us in Burma. They've helped us in China. They follow up in Korea. We've had some Korean contacts. Even Japanese follow up in a couple of instances. There's Joey teaching. He's our second son. And the story of this man is the kind of story we like to tell. His name's Edwin Enso. The first time I taught in our school there, the very first session of classes about 20 years ago, Edwin was in class. He sat up on the front row. He listened. He frowned. He clenched his fist. He didn't like what I was saying. He didn't like being there, I don't think. But something, the curiosity or whatever, he stayed. I didn't know why he was there. This class was for men who wanted to become preachers, who wanted to become teachers. And Edwin didn't seem like he wanted to be there. I found out one of our other men had brought him, and that Edwin was a Pentecostal preacher. He wasn't a member of the church, but he stayed through the whole session, came back the next time, went through about 3 years of training, was baptized, and he is our most productive preacher in that part of the world today. It's unbelievable what Edwin is doing. And he had to be convinced, and he was. And we like that. That's a home run for us when we develop someone like that. We've started a new school on the island of Samar. He leads that school. He runs the campaign program for several islands, covering millions of people. Church buildings being built, baptisms every week, just a dynamo as far as the work is concerned. They bought a van, and they can take that van from island to island on ferries to help them with their work, distributing literature there. Just a tremendous job being done, and about every 3-4 weeks, a picture like this of a mass baptism. And this is a result of a gospel meeting that he and his team held. So the Philippine work is good, even though there's some tension. It's letting up a little bit now since the election. The Philippine president's backing off a little bit, and it looks like we're going to maintain our long-time relationship with that country. Myanmar is Burma to us. We have 5 schools there. 2 of them are close together down at the bottom. A Buddhist country with about 60 million people. Real old line Buddhism, a more pure form than you see in places like Korea. And we wondered if we'd succeed, and we have 2,000 congregations there today. And they worship that right there. That's amazing to me, that somebody would worship something like that, but that woman's doing that. Now that woman is at the temple, and she's got something wrong in her life. She may be sick. We didn't ask. She may have a sick child. She may be, her husband may be losing his job, losing their home. Who knows what it is? It's serious, whatever it is, and she's praying to that idol. Now, if you can get to people like that and you can tell them about our God, if you're capable of explaining to them what our God is like, His nature, that He's living, and that He will answer you when you talk to Him, and that He will be active in your life, and that His Son came to this world and lived among us and taught us and died and was raised from the dead, they'll believe and they'll obey. They understand the difference between those images made out of stone and metal and wood and a living God. So that's why we've had tremendous success in this country, because they're very, very receptive. They're poor. They're used to oppression by a military government. They have nothing. They have no freedom, or have had no freedom. And the opportunity to be a part of a greater kingdom and to have a home in heaven forever, and a God who will hear us while we're here has resonated with them. You can't teach them enough. Spend time in those classes, and they never turn you loose. That's our directors there, with our main school at a place called Mabi, north of Rangoon. And this is the new school I was talking about, and that's the director on the left. Jay Ati is his name. Classes there. Now these students, most of them come to a major university outside of Rangoon from one region of the country. Then it crosses, it really borders, and some of them come from China. It's one particular language group that comes there. 40,000 students in this university. They're learning to be chemists and engineers and doctors and pharmacists and attorneys. They're very carefully selected, and we just graduated 40 of those students in our Bible school there. And when they go back home as members of the church and begin to practice their profession as a doctor or a college professor or whatever, they are a ready-made missionary. And they don't have to have support. All we do is provide them with materials that they can translate, print, and use in their own language. They'll have the means to do it. So we're really pleased with that new effort. Up in the Kalay area, this is northwest Myanmar, borders India. There's Don Posey, Tin Lin, and his wife Candy there, and I'll tell you a story about her in a few minutes. And then there's Tin Lin with a youth camp earlier in the year, children's camp, and that's Don Posey's wife with Winsome Translating, about 100 kids or so for that, and church buildings in Burma. We were there in 2015 when their government changed. They had their first free election, and the laws changed. There's freedom of religion, real freedom of religion, and for the first time the church could have buildings and meet openly, and that's one of many, many congregations that's starting to do that. We had our first mission into 2 states we'd never been into, the Bago and Rakhine states. They'd been off limits because the military had them isolated because they were supposedly developing nuclear weapons in a facility there. They stopped that. We made our first mission there. These are some pictures from that mission. There's Robin Dunaway and Jamie, our oldest son, participated in this one, and now there are congregations there in that region of the country. And these are some of the ladies from that tribal group. They're Asho people. A-S-H-O is their tribal name, and that's their tribal colors there that those women, elderly women, are wearing in our meeting. From Burma to China, this is an unbelievable opportunity that opened up for us. We had Burmese preachers who were able to cross the border into China and teach family members along the border areas. Families lived on both sides. About 10 years ago, and we started training a couple of people. We now have 6 really, really good Chinese preachers that work with us. That's 2 of them, Luke and Barnabas. They both took English names. They have Chinese names, and I couldn't even begin to tell you what they are. But they've been working with us for several years. They make the total team, 6 of them, each one makes 6 trips a year into Yunnan State and Tibet region of China. And we just got our last report from Luke and Barnabas. They went together. They had 16 baptisms on their last trip. And then Jayati on his trip had a special request that he come and teach at a denominational congregation, Christian group. Christianity is legal in this state of China, and the church is legal there too, but as a result of our work. But this group, they call themselves non-denominational. They don't use instrumental music. They baptize for remission of sins. They're probably the result of work done there 100 years ago by the church. We don't know how that came to be, but he went to one congregation and worked with them for a week and had some baptisms, and they're beginning to transition to try to accept all of the doctrine of the church. And they said there's 260 more groups like us, congregations. We want you to teach all of those 200 and something congregations. So we're pleased. Things like that happen. That's another home run. There's Jayati, small groups sometimes, studying. And then we get larger groups. We get into denominational groups sometimes and are able to teach them. In all these countries, we translate and print in their languages. That's essential to success, especially long-term success in the work, is to get all your material printed and widely distributed. On one of our recent campaigns, the preaching team made a several hundred-mile circuit and stopped at about 60 places and taught in every place. When they went back, the next trip, which was about 6 months later, at each place that they went, people had been studying our literature, and they were waiting for them to come because they were at the point where they felt sure they needed to be baptized. And so they were baptizing people all along this way. And as they finished their teaching, and that literature is a powerful teacher. There's a group. Sri Lanka is an older work, dates back to the 60s with the Chotes, based out of the capital city of Colombo. We had the biggest group I've seen there in 25 years. That was this spring, and we had about 200. 5 years ago, I was there, we had 12. Civil War had just ended about a year before, and it's just getting better and better. They're reaching out into other communities. New congregations are forming. This work is back on its feet again. And that's one of our team members on this trip, Tom Barrier, my uncle, and the Pine Hill congregation underwrites the work there in Sri Lanka, and that's Harold Thomas. And here's another picture of Harold and his wife, and Harold leads our team there. We have 2 bases in India. We cover all of India with radio and television programs and have follow-up teams. We actually have work in the city where the Taj Mahal is located. I visited the Taj this year, first time in many, many years. And we have congregations close by as a result of Hindi radio or Hindi television programs. And our North India work is doing better than it's ever done before because of this new TV broadcast we have. India is still a hard place to work and visit because the environment is just so harsh for us. Here's the meeting place for the church in New Delhi, and the nucleus of that work is and has been through the years the David family. And there's Sonny and Francis on the right, they're elders and preachers, and then Samson and Nelson on the left, other 2 brothers in that family who also teach and can preach sometimes, and they're just a real asset. There's Sonny on the TV broadcast. Our school is run by a 3rd generation David we brought to Florence to train. Vinay, that's his wife and son with him there on our last trip. And these are just pictures from some of their campaigns, and this is all Hindi-speaking North India work. Our base for South India, really the base for all of India today, they go all over the country, based out of Bangalore, led by P.R. Swami, and our school is called the Bangalore Institute. We had 5 Americans there last spring for our program in Bangalore, and there's Jeremy, and Joey was with me as well, and some others. Then here's P.R. Swami baptizing a lady. And the good thing about that picture is those 2 men standing there with Swami, helping him with that, not long ago, less than 2 years ago, were Muslims, and they've been converted. And now they're faithful Christians and helping to preach the gospel. So we're happy to see things like that happen. Malaysia and Indonesia, 2 Muslim countries, Islamic republics. Our work is based off the island of Borneo. The north side, you can see the pin there. This work, we have to be very careful because of the Muslim government, and that's close to where I was staying. Out in the country, out of the cities, we have a lot of growth, and this is a village congregation that's about 5 or 6 years old with 200 members, and there's quite a number of those. We're in Latin America from radio programs that we started about 10 years ago, maybe 8 years ago now. We didn't know that we'd get a response. We broadcast in Spanish. We're getting responses from all over Latin America, and the pins show where we're putting follow-up teams. And we've started Portuguese programs. Over on the right side, the pin is in Brazil. Of course, they speak Portuguese. And the focus of this effort is to reach rural populations. There are missionaries in all the major cities. The Lord's Church spends about 80% of our mission budget in Latin America, and it represents about 15% of the world's population. So we didn't want to go to Latin America with our work. We wanted to go where there were fewer missionaries, but we had the opportunity to do the radio, and it's paying off because it's getting to a population that our missionaries haven't been getting to. We started a radio program in April in Brazil. They played it at 5:30 on Saturday morning. And in that program it said, if you want to study the Bible next Saturday morning about 10 o'clock, come to this location and we'll study the Bible with you there. This is who showed up the next Saturday. That morning we had another broadcast that said, next week, if you want to study the Bible, come. We had about 100 the next week. It's been doing that every week since April. And we've moved this now to another. We've got 2 cities. There are 2 communities. They're not cities, but they're reaching large populations where we're doing that down in Latin America. There's a video here that they will activate from up there, and if we can get sound with it, I don't know. This is a work in progress. Every week it's different. That was the largest Muslim place of worship in New Delhi, India. It's in Old Delhi. This is the largest Hindu place of worship in New Delhi, India. I don't know if we're going, how the sound's going to do back there. all of that gives you just a little better feel for what it's like in those parts of the world. It's so different from here. It's hard to comprehend. One thing I tell people, you can't get from even the video part of it. It's better than just pictures, but you can't get the smell. And that sense is really stimulated as well when you're there. But anyway, their soul is just as important to the Lord as yours and mine. And they're receptive, and they've never been taught, and will be held accountable for the fact that they're not taught if they never are when we face God in judgment someday. That'll be on us. And so that's why we do as much as we can to reach as many people as we can. That's the mission of the church. That's what we're supposed to be doing. About 3.5 months ago, one Sunday morning, I didn't have an appointment anywhere, and we were at home for worship. Just sat down. Janet and I sat down. We very seldom get the opportunity to do that. She had her cell phone with her. It was on, and she got a ding or whatever it is that she knew she had a message from overseas. And so she looked at her message, and it was from Tin Lin. And I've told you the story of Tin Lin, how he signed a document giving his life in exchange for me to have an opportunity to preach for 5 days in Burma, northern Burma, the very first time about 15 years ago. And he survived that. He was sentenced to death but was never executed. They had execution scheduled for him twice, but because of uprisings in the country, it had nothing to do with Christianity. Those uprisings resulted in the government calling off the mass execution of Christians both times, and he survived, and finally the government has changed, and he eventually is going to be pardoned. But anyway, we got a message from Tin Lin, and we had a couple of messages from him over the previous 2 weeks, and his wife Cherry was sick, and he said she had scarlet fever. I don't know what scarlet fever does to you, but anyway, this message said, I'm at my wit's end. I'm scared to death. Cherry is dying right now. Said her throat has swollen. She can't get water or air down her throat, and she's about to die. And I need to talk to somebody. I don't know what to do. He had been to the hospital there. The town has about 100,000 people. They have one doctor in town, in the hospital. The doctor was gone, and they had given her whatever medicine they had already. They didn't have anything else they could do. And he was scared because his precious wife was about to die, and he wanted to be talking to us. And Janet quickly texted Dr. Stephen Christian, who's a member of our team in Double Springs, Alabama. Stephen works at the emergency room in Coleman, Alabama, a medical doctor, and she couldn't get Stephen, so she texted Don Posey, an elder at Double Springs, who's a close friend of Stephen's, who was in the pictures there, who travels with us. And she got Don and told him what was going on and said, where's Stephen? Maybe he can send something to Tin Lin, tell him something that he can do. Well, it took a little while to get a hold to Stephen. He had worked the previous 24 hours in the emergency room. He was on his way home, and he was going to bed. This was Sunday morning. They were getting ready, Don was getting ready to teach Bible class. But anyway, they got a hold to Stephen, and Stephen asked Tin Lin to send him a picture of Cherry, and he did, and he measured some things, her temperature and breathing rate, a bunch of things like that, and they communicated on the phone there. And Stephen concluded that Cherry would had a few hours to live. She was dying. And he said, Don then got on there and said, Tin Lin, he lives 2 blocks from the airport. He said, you take Cherry down to the airport, and if there is a plane going to Rangoon, you offer them whatever it takes to get on that airplane and take her to Rangoon and get her in the hospital down there. Well, it's a $60